They said my cows were emotionally disrupted. Then they threw a HOA picnic on my pasture, got mad when a kid stepped in manure, and filed a health complaint against me. Oh, and their parking lot, turns out it's on my land. That's when I stopped being the friendly rancher and started charging rent. Welcome to Texas, sweetheart. You HOA'd yourself into a legal rodeo, and I brought the receipts, the orange steaks, and one hell of a brisket. In Copperidge, Texas, there's an old saying, if it ain't your land, don't act like it is. I'm Jesse Walker, third-generation rancher, and I live by that rule every morning before sunrise, coffee in hand, boots in the dirt, and 300 acres of family legacy stretched out in front of me. My granddad cleared this land after the war with nothing but calloused hands and stubborn faith, and my father kept it alive through droughts, recessions, and developers knocking with fake smiles. We run Walker Farms. Not some Instagram petting zoo, but a working cattle operation with the smell, sound, and soul of real ranch life. That smell, that's what paid for half the roads around here. So when HOA Karen in a red sweater and knockoff Prada wedges knocked on my gate to complain about bovine auditory pollution, I knew two things. One, this wasn't going to be a friendly chat. Two, her clipboard was loaded with nonsense. She introduced herself like a politician running unopposed. Debbie Malloy, acting president of Cedar Hollow Estates, HOA, she said, flashing that smile you get when someone's about to tell you what you can't do on your own land. I was loading 40-pound feed sacks into the back of my F-250 when she launched into a speech about community harmony and exposure to agricultural allergens. The woman looked like she'd never been closer to a cow than the dairy aisle, yet here she was, standing on a gravel driveway I've regraded more times than she's changed jobs, telling me my ranch was disturbing the suburban balance. I set down my sack, wiped my hands, and gave her my best Texas polite. Ma'am, I said, that moo you heard at 6 a.m. was my heifer announcing breakfast. You want silence, you should have moved next to a yoga studio, not a cattle ranch. She didn't flinch, just scribbled something furious on her clipboard like it was a citation pad, and she was deputized by the HOA gods. That same week, I found a flyer taped to my mailbox that read, "Stop the smell. Protect your family from harmful farm emissions." Harmful emissions? Ma'am, I shovel what your HOA calls fertilizer every morning before you even post your first Facebook status. I tried to shrug it off. Figured it was just one overzealous transplant from Dallas playing neighborhood sheriff. But then came the follow-up, an official letter, printed on HOA letterhead, delivered to my mailbox like it was a court summons. Claims of livestock-generated noise disturbances and potential violations of community wellness standards. The kind of language that sounds smart until you realize it was likely copied off a blog titled, "How to Intimidate Farmers in 5 Easy Steps." The real kicker? She wasn't even subtle. She bolded a line in the middle that read, "Failure to comply may result in further action deemed necessary by the Cedar Hollow HOA." I almost laughed. My property predates Cedar Hollow by 6 decades. Their subdivision used to be grazing field until the county sold off parcels back in 2001, and these folks showed up with lawn care subscriptions and HOA bylaws and suddenly think they discovered the Wild West. Maybe Malloy, clipboard clutched like a sword of righteousness, wasn't just trying to pick a fight. She was trying to colonize a ranch. But here's the thing about trying to regulate dirt you don't own. It usually ends with mud on your shoes, or worse, cow pies. So I kept working, but I started watching not just the cattle or the fences. I started watching my neighbors, the way they suddenly didn't wave, the way one woman yanked her kid's arm when he smiled at me by the fence. HOA wasn't just filing noise complaints, they were planting fear. And Debbie was just getting started. Now, I'm not the kind of man to panic over a flyer or a clipboard, but when half your neighbors start treating you like you're cooking meth in a barn instead of feeding cattle, you take notice, especially when you see a drone flying over your hayfield on a Tuesday morning, hovering like it's on recon. I walked out, looked up, and spotted a guy in skinny jeans and a flannel 3 sizes too small standing by the HOA community entrance, remote control in hand and earbuds in like he was about to DJ a farmer's market. He was with Debbie, of course, pointing at things like the sky was going to submit to zoning rules. "We're collecting decibel data," she called out. as if cattle lowing before sunrise was some sort of sonic war crime. I waved and walked off. If I'd stood there 1 minute longer, I might have asked her if she was going to tax the smell of manure too. A few days later, a manila envelope arrived, marked urgent notice of noncompliance. Inside was a packet of paper that looked like it had been printed at 3 a.m. off a mommy blog, stapled together by someone who thought bold fonts made things legally binding. It accused me of excessive mechanical disruption, unregulated organic waste, and my personal favorite, failure to uphold community tranquility thresholds. It wasn't just laughable, it was infuriating. The pages included what they called an informal map of agreeable perimeter zones, which was just a Google satellite image with a red Sharpie drawn over it. They claimed that 12 feet of my east pasture was within visual nuisance proximity of the Cedar Hollow walking trail. I asked my lawyer what that meant. She said it meant someone didn't like looking at cows while they walked their golden doodle. Then came the kicker. HOA board minutes were published online, complete with notes like recommendation, schedule petition to introduce mandatory fencing height to obscure livestock, and potential to explore environmental wellness fee. That's HOA code for we're about to try taxing you for the air. Debbie also began recruiting volunteers for what she called a community resilience watch, complete with laminated name tags and fluorescent vests. No joke, one afternoon I saw a guy in cargo shorts and a GoPro trying to measure wind direction next to my cattle pen. I asked what he was doing, and he said, dead serious, checking for particulate drift. I said, buddy, if you're breathing in Texas and you're surprised by cow particles, you're in the wrong zip code. But the part that made my blood run colder than a busted well pump in February, Debbie had started a private Facebook group, Cedar Families for Safe Living, where she posted filtered photos of my ranch in grayscale with red warning symbols photoshopped over the cattle. Is this what you want next to your children? The caption read. Comments rolled in. Unacceptable. So sad this is allowed. Can't we vote to move the farm? As if I was a nail salon blocking their yoga views. And just like that, the family business older than the town streetlights became public enemy number one with a few filters and font choices. Still, I didn't strike back, not yet. I let her build her little HOA empire, stack her accusations, gather her petitions, because my granddad always told me, never interrupt your enemy when they're digging their own hole. And Debbie, she was digging with a golden shovel. What she didn't realize was that the red Sharpie map she drew wasn't just inaccurate. It was about to become her biggest mistake. See, there's one thing Karen never expects when she declares war on a rancher. We keep receipts. And mine, that went all the way back to 1984. I went digging through my grandfather's old desk the next morning, just like I used to when I was 10, searching for silver dollars or vintage shotgun shells. Only this time, I wasn't after relics. I was after proof. Proof that my family's land hadn't magically shifted 12 feet east because Karen felt like building a walking path. Didn't take long. Tucked beneath a stack of dusty livestock ledgers and war ration coupons, I found a property survey dated July 12, 1984, hand-signed by both my grandfather and a county engineer with a mustache wider than Debbie's HOA influence. It showed clear, measured boundaries. Turns out that visual nuisance perimeter she kept referencing, that trail wasn't near my fence line, it was on my side of it. I wasn't planning to confront her yet. I was going to play it cool until the day she crossed the line in boots she wasn't qualified to lace up. Saturday morning, I wake up to music. Not country, not gospel, not even bad pop. It's kids' party music, balloons, laughter. Then I see them. Debbie and her clipboard squad have set up folding tables and lawn chairs right next to my hayfield. Giant banner flapping in the wind. Cedar Hollow Family Fun Day. Building community together. Bounce house inflated 20 feet from my cattle gate. A makeshift petting zoo made out of stolen traffic cones and 2 exhausted-looking rabbits. And about 30 kids playing tag on my land. I walked out to the fence line, arms crossed, trying to stay calm. Debbie spotted me and waved like we were co-hosting this circus. Oh, Jesse, it's just a little event for the kids. You don't mind, right? They're barely on your side of the fence. I looked down. Someone had tied helium balloons to my fence post. Like it was a party decoration, the nerve. Ma'am, I said through clenched teeth, you are standing in a cow rotation paddock. That ain't a playground. That's a methane-powered minefield. She laughed like I'd told a joke. 30 minutes later, a kid slipped on a half-dry cow patty and went home crying with a T-shirt full of Texas authenticity. I didn't even say I told you so. I just watched. By Monday, the narrative had twisted again. Debbie posted pictures of the event in the Facebook group, carefully cropped to make it look like my land was a trash heap, threatening local children. Look how close the hazard is to our babies, she captioned, followed by a slideshow of blurry zoom-ins on manure piles, fencing wire, and my old tractor's oil drip. Then came the health department complaint. I got the notice in the mail 2 days later. Unregulated agricultural waste near community gathering spaces. Someone had reported me for biohazard exposure, claiming my cows were defecating within projectile distance of children's faces. That was the phrase, projectile distance. I nearly choked on my coffee. Now, a health inspection ain't something you can wave off. They show up with clipboards of their own, the kind that actually matter. And if they find so much as a misplaced fuel drum, they can fine you into oblivion. But I wasn't worried. My ranch is cleaner than most restaurants in this county. Still, it pissed me off. Karen had brought her HOA war into my barnyard. She'd used a kiddie picnic as bait, and now she was trying to paint me as the town's public enemy number 2, right after gluten. So I cleaned every corner of that ranch like the governor was coming for supper. And I waited, not for Karen, for the inspector. Because if they wanted to test my operation, they were about to find out what happens when a cowboy does his homework. What Debbie didn't know, and what I was counting on, was that she just triggered the very system that was going to bury her in paperwork, truth, and state-certified measurements. The county inspector showed up Tuesday morning sharp, clipboard in hand, badge around his neck, and an expression like he'd rather be anywhere else but here. Mr. Walker, he said, stepping out of a beige government-issued SUV with the urgency of a man who's had too much bad coffee and too little patience, we received a complaint about unregulated animal waste and potential contamination within proximity of residential spaces. I nodded, motion toward the barn. Well, sir, you're welcome to inspect every square inch. I've got records, logs, and more sanitizer than a hospital on flu day. For the next 2 hours, he measured, checked, photographed, and poked through every stall, water trough, and feed shed. By the time he left, he looked almost embarrassed. Your place is cleaner than the prep kitchen at the county fairgrounds, he said. Honestly, it's textbook. He shook my hand, handed me a copy of the clean bill of health, and muttered under his breath, waste of my damn time. But while I had cleared one front, I knew the war was far from over. Karen didn't play fair. She played loud and dishonest. That's why, as the sun dipped behind the tree line that evening, I found myself back inside my grandfather's old office, flipping through boxes of records he'd kept since Reagan was in office. I remembered what he used to say every time we mended fences. If someone questions what's yours, show them ink. That's when I found the original deed tucked behind a yellowing map dated June 15th, 1984, signed by the county and notarized. It clearly marked the property lines, and most importantly, it included a clause. No adjacent residential development shall interfere with existing agricultural operations on this property, nor shall the agricultural operations be subject to revision due to residential discomfort. But the real twist came in the form of a folded survey map, hand-drawn but later digitized and verified in 1999. According to the coordinates, the walking trail, the parking lot, and even part of Cedar Hollow's entrance road were sitting on a sliver of land that technically belonged to my family. That meant the HOA wasn't just pestering me with fake rules. They'd built their subdivision's welcome mat on my dirt. And the best part, they'd been trespassing for nearly 3 years without even knowing it. Or maybe they did and just hoped I'd never check. Either way, the moment I laid that map on the table, the power shifted. The next day, I went to see Carl, one of the oldest residents on the edge of Cedar Hollow, and a Vietnam vet with a handshake like a wrench. Carl, I asked, you remember signing any HOA charter? He snorted so hard his dentures clicked. Hell no. That woman shoved some clipboard in my face last year and said it was a noise complaint. Turns out it was a proxy vote. I showed him the HOA membership list. His name was on it, along with 14 others who'd apparently voted Debbie into power. We went door to door that evening. By sunset, I had half a dozen affidavits signed from residents who'd never agreed to join any HOA, let alone file complaints against my ranch. One even said Debbie offered free landscaping in exchange for their signature. Classic clipboard bribery. It was becoming clear Debbie's empire wasn't built on consensus. It was built on deception, duct tape, and Pinterest fonts. The facade of authority she'd been wielding like a badge was cracking. But I wasn't ready to strike just yet. No, I had something better in mind. The HOA had planted their flag in the wrong pasture, and now I was going to make them pay rent. Literally, I just booked a meeting with a land surveyor named Ray McConnell, and by this time next week, Cedar Hollow's parking lot was going to be outlined in bright orange stakes and a whole lot of legal trouble. By Thursday morning, Ray McConnell had his truck parked beside my fence, unloading more high-tech equipment than a NASA field op. He wasn't some weekend contractor with a tape measure and a hunch. Ray was the real deal. 30 years in land surveying, court certified, and more familiar with Texas property disputes than most district judges. I handed him the old survey my granddad had tucked away, and without missing a beat, he gave a low whistle. Well, damn, Jesse, if this holds up against the county records, they didn't just step over your line, they built a welcome committee on it. That afternoon, Ray and his assistant spent hours staking bright orange boundary markers right into Cedar Hollow's pride and joy. The entrance drive, a quarter of their walking path, and best of all, the entire community parking lot. If HOA wanted to keep using it, they'd need more than clipboards. They'd need a lease. I didn't announce it publicly, not yet, but I did what any rancher with a sense of humor and a long memory would do. I had signs printed, big metal, professionally cut. Pilot Quip Ranch property. Trespassers will be charged monthly. Installed at every edge of my land that touched Cedar Hollow. It only took about 6 hours before I got my first text from Lisa Porter, the HOA's vice secretary. Hey, Jesse, just wondering if there's been some sort of misunderstanding with the signs. It's making people nervous. I replied with a photo of the deed and coordinates, followed by, no misunderstanding. You've been parking on my land for 3 years. Time to talk lease agreements. I ended it with a cow emoji, just for fun. Then came the emails. Residents who'd once backed Debbie started asking polite questions. How much is the rent? Can we negotiate? Will this affect access to our homes? And my personal favorite, does this mean you own the street too? It didn't, not yet anyway, but they were spooked, and rightly so. Most of them didn't even know Debbie had failed to register the HOA's easement claims with the county, which meant their access relied purely on assumptions and asphalt. I wasn't being cruel, I was being strategic. They'd walked into my pasture, set up shop, and declared war. All I did was hang a price tag. Debbie, of course, didn't take it well. On Friday evening, she showed up at the edge of my driveway again. Same red sweater, same clipboard, except this time her face was a shade paler than normal. Mr. Walker, she began, trying to summon that fake politeness she'd weaponized for weeks. This aggressive signage and intimidation of residents will not be tolerated by the HOA. I leaned against my fence and looked at her like she'd asked me to leash my cows. Debbie, it's not aggression, it's real estate. Your HOA built a parking lot on private ranch land. That makes you all tenants. And tenants, they pay rent. She opened her mouth, but no words came out. Just that wide-eyed realization that everything she'd built was starting to collapse. And not because I fought back with fists, but because I fought back with facts. Then I handed her a letter. Official notice of trespass, demand for retroactive payment, and a lease proposal. $400, 0 cents per household, monthly, or vacate the lot within 30 days. She called it extortion. My lawyer called it market rate. I left her standing there, stunned, and walked back to my porch as the sun dipped low over the orange-capped stakes lining my property like a fence of quiet revenge. But I wasn't done, because while Debbie scrambled for answers, I was preparing the next play, the one that would bring her whole clipboard kingdom crashing down, not in a courtroom, but at the next HOA meeting, where I planned to show up, uninvited, with evidence, witnesses, and one county-certified land map that would turn Cedar Hollow. The next Thursday evening, I cleaned my boots, pressed my shirt, and walked straight into the Cedar Hollow HOA meeting like I was invited, because legally I had every right to be there. The room was a repurposed portable classroom at the edge of the subdivision, filled with collapsible chairs, bad coffee, and nervous glances. Debbie stood at the front, red sweater ironed to military precision, gripping her clipboard so tight I thought she might snap it in half. She was halfway through a slideshow titled Preserving Community Standards Amid Adverse Adjacency. Translation, How to Get Rid of Me Without Triggering a Lawsuit. I walked in during slide 7, titled Mitigating Agricultural Risk Factors, and asked calmly, mind if I share something with the group? You could have heard a tumbleweed sneeze. She blinked. Someone dropped a pen. Then, with a strained smile and voice 1 octave too high, Debbie said, well, technically, this is a members-only discussion. I raised a finger and held up a sealed manila envelope. Technically, I replied, this is a cease and desist letter for the unauthorized use of my land, along with certified survey maps, health inspection clearance, and sworn affidavits from 6 residents saying their HOA memberships were faked. I walked to the front table, laid down the papers like a poker player laying out a royal flush, and turned to the room. Folks, now I didn't come here to pick a fight. I came to show you who's actually been trespassing and who's been lying to your faces. The silence that followed was broken by Carol Jenkins, the HOA secretary, standing up and clearing her throat like she was about to deliver a eulogy. I need to say something, she said, voice trembling. Debbie told us the land was public easement. She said Jesse had multiple citations. She even claimed the county was investigating environmental violation. Carol looked at me, eyes glassy. I called the county last week. They told me they've never had a single complaint about your ranch. Everything she told us, it was all made up. She reached into her purse, pulled out a thumb drive, and added, I've got audio recordings from 3 board meetings. You'll hear it for yourself. Debbie's face drained of color faster than HOA dues during tax season. She tried to recover, fumbling with her clicker, but the room was already slipping out of her grasp. Derek Nasher, who until then had looked like a hostage, spoke next. I signed those budget approvals because Debbie said we were paying for legal advice to protect our kids, not to sue a man for having cows on land his family's owned longer than we've had plumbing. One by one, the room turned. Residents who'd once posted Facebook rants about manure now looked like they'd woken up from a bad spell. Lisa Porter stood up and announced she was pulling her name from the petition. 17 others followed. The room had flipped like a pancake at a Sunday brunch. By the end of the meeting, Carol had resigned as HOA secretary, only to be applauded and immediately reappointed by majority vote as interim president. She promised to launch an internal audit, verify all membership signatures, and freeze any further HOA action against the ranch. Debbie stood there, still gripping that clipboard like it had magical powers, but it was clear the spell had broken. Her power wasn't just gone, it had been dismantled, debunked, and demolished by her own board. As I left the meeting, Derek caught up with me in the parking lot. You're going to charge us rent, aren't you? He asked sheepishly. I nodded. Yeah, but not because I want to. Because I should have been charging since day one. He sighed, then added, honestly, that's fair. I tipped my hat and walked off, just as Debbie emerged from the meeting trailer, blinking under the harsh streetlight. The queen of clipboards had lost her kingdom, but I had a feeling she wasn't done swinging. And I was right, because by Monday morning, her next move would be her boldest, dumbest, and most public disaster yet. Debbie's next move came fast and loud, like a toddler throwing a tantrum with a megaphone. By Monday morning, every local news station from Copper Ridge to Austin had received a tip about a land-owning bully extorting suburban families. That bully, of course, was me. She painted herself as a single mom under siege, victim of a greedy rancher who charged innocent homeowners just to park near their own houses. The headline on Channel 9's morning segment read, Texas HOA president battles wealthy rancher over land dispute, community at risk. They used stock footage of cows mooing over ominous piano music, like I was running a bovine cartel. I watched it over black coffee and laughed so hard I nearly dropped the mug. But what Debbie didn't count on, again, was that I kept everything. Within hours, my lawyer Rosie emailed reporters copies of the 1984 deed, the county certified survey, the HOA disclosures that every Cedar Hollow resident had initialed at purchase, disclosures that clearly acknowledged adjacency to an active cattle ranch. Then came the kicker. The clean bill of health from the county inspector, stamped, signed, and smelling fresher than Debbie's entire PR stunt. To drive it home, Rosie also sent over an audio clip from Carol's thumb drive, the one where Debbie joked about scaring people into compliance during an HOA meeting. That played on the evening news like a mic drop moment from a courtroom drama. But the real reckoning didn't come from the press. It came from the residents themselves. Within 48 hours, 22 homeowners banded together and filed a class action complaint against Debbie personally for misuse of HOA funds, falsifying documentation, and putting the neighborhood at legal risk without consent. Apparently, she'd spent over $4,200, 0 cents of HOA funds on lawyer fees and campaign materials without approval. Some of that money went toward her community safety Facebook ads, others toward printing lawn signs that now sat folded behind her trash cans. The HOA board voted to freeze all her powers pending the outcome, and Carol, now acting president, submitted formal paperwork to the state attorney general's office. Things were unraveling quicker than a Walmart tarp in a Texas storm. Debbie's final Hail Mary was a cease and desist letter from a new lawyer out of Dallas. Real fancy header, gold embossing, lots of threatening legalese. It accused me of harassment, intimidation, and my personal favorite, unauthorized rent collection via signage. The letter demanded I remove all aggressive property markings and refund any rent collected. My lawyer, Rosie, responded with a one-liner, "Charging rent on private land isn't extortion, it's real estate." She then attached 6 pages of case law, easement precedent, and HOA disclosure clauses. Her last sentence read, "We look forward to seeing you in court, preferably with accurate maps this time." While Debbie was busy burning every bridge in sight, the IRS began sniffing around her finances. Turns out, when the HOA board submitted their audit findings, they uncovered several months of unreported side income from her MLM beauty business, income she'd declared as consulting on her mortgage application. That triggered an automatic flag, and now she was looking at tax fraud on top of everything else. As the pressure mounted, Debbie started missing HOA meetings. Her once daily posts in Cedar Families for Safe Living dropped off. By the following week, a for sale sign appeared in her yard, flipped backward, as if she couldn't quite admit it was over. But it wasn't just over, it was historic. Carol called for an emergency community vote to restructure HOA operations, eliminate discretionary funds, and implement resident approval for all legal action moving forward. The same people who had once accused me of poisoning the community were now asking if they could buy beef directly from the ranch. And as for Debbie, she'd gone full HOA Karen and ended up HOA'd by her own neighborhood. Still, I had one more move to make, because if karma was real, and I believe it is, the final blow wasn't mine to deliver. It was already on the way, sealed in a manila envelope marked Office of the Attorney General. 3 weeks after Debbie's media meltdown and silent retreat into legal oblivion, Cedar Hollow looked different, peaceful almost. The HOA newsletter that once featured passive-aggressive font choices and veiled threats now came signed by Carol Jenkins and included actual community updates like potluck dates, no more emergency discussions about livestock proximity or ridiculous acronyms like PCVZ, Potential Cow Viewing Zone. Instead, the new HOA board focused on rebuilding trust, beginning with the one thing every Texan respects, a cookout. Carol called me personally. "Jesse," she said, voice a little sheepish, "we're planning a community event to reset the tone, family style, low drama, and we were wondering, would you consider hosting it?" I paused, looked out over the pasture where a dozen kids had once accidentally trampled my alfalfa during that infamous picnic. "You bring your own chairs," I replied, "and I'll bring the beef." The Cedar Hollow Ranch Day was born. We held it on a Saturday under clear skies right behind the main barn. I donated a few cuts from our grass-fed beef stock. Families brought coleslaw, cornbread, deviled eggs, and that one questionable potato salad nobody touched. The bounce house was back, but this time on HOA land, and the kids got to feed calves, tour the stables, and even help brush down the older steers. One little girl named Emma asked if cows had birthdays. I said, "Sure, but they don't blow out candles, they just chew slower." Her dad laughed and bought 5 pounds of sirloin off of me that afternoon. The shift in tone wasn't just surface level. Residents who had once voted for noise ordinances now asked questions about sustainable ranching. Lisa Porter, one of Debbie's former allies, started a blog about rural living with respect and interviewed me for the first post. Mark, a contractor who'd sided with HOA complaints early on, offered to help regrade the gravel road between our properties for free. The monthly parking agreement was renegotiated at $300, 0 cents per household, all proceeds going into a shared community fund that upgraded street lighting, added speed bumps near the kids' crossing path, and, at my suggestion, funded scholarships for students interested in agriculture. And Debbie? She never returned. Her house went into foreclosure before her lawyer could draft another letter. Rumor had it she moved back to Plano with her cousin, took down her Facebook group, and started pitching essential oils again under a different name. The Attorney General's office, meanwhile, concluded their investigation with a quiet but firm ban. She was barred from serving in any HOA capacity in the state of Texas, effective permanently. The cherry on top? A new HOA bylaw passed 43-2, requiring that all legal actions against adjacent landowners receive 75% resident approval and undergo external legal review, unofficially dubbed the Debbie Clause. A year later, Cedar Hollow Ranch Day became a tradition. Every spring, families brought dishes, and kids lined up to name that calf. My favorite so far? Moonrow. I'd stand on my porch after dusk, watching families pack up under string lights. We'd all hung together, and remember how this war started. With a clipboard, a mood, and one woman who underestimated the value of history, patience, and property lines. So here's the takeaway, neighbor to neighbor, know your boundaries. Literally. Respect doesn't come from titles or clipboards. It comes from consistency, community, and a damn good brisket. And if someone tries to push you off your land with fake authority and scented petitions, don't get angry. Get documentation, and maybe a surveyor with orange steaks and a sense of humor. Turns out, when Karen brings the drama, the best revenge is a barbecue. Sometimes the loudest voice in the room isn't the one with the truth. It's just holding a clipboard. What this story taught me, and hopefully others, is that real strength doesn't come from shouting back louder. It comes from knowing your rights, holding your ground, and letting the facts do the talking. In a world full of HOA Karens trying to rewrite reality with attitude and Google Law degrees, patience and preparation are the true power moves. When your legacy's on the line, don't engage in screaming matches, engage in paper trails. And most importantly, remember, respect is earned, not enforced by neighborhood committees. So the next time someone tries to HOA you out of your own land, give them a smile, hand them a copy of your deed, and if that doesn't work, offer them a burger from the cattle they tried to ban. Revenge is best served medium rare with legal sauce on the side.